Bitcoin Miami. There's the Ordinals conference on Thursday. There is Bitcoin Miami. Actually, Bitcoin Miami starts on Thursday, but you need to have the VIP tickets or like the special tickets to already have access on Thursday. And then the conference for the common folks starts on Friday. We're going to be discussing that. There is an interesting trend at the moment with Ordinals, with BRC20. I just want to, for full transparency, our investment fund has invested $1 million into a project on the Ordinals side. But it has nothing to do with this, actually. We're not going to be talking about that. Purely, we're going to actually discuss philosophies, Bitcoin. We're going to discuss a bit on what's going on in the market. Ethereum struggled finalizing twice in a row, and people kind of made a big deal out of this. Bitcoin, Ethereum almost became unusable with all the fees. People also making a big deal out of this. Are bigger blocks the solution? Is Lightning in danger? So, and it's going to be quite a nice discussion. I think we're going to have quite some fun. Market's been quite sideways over the last week. Doesn't feel like it though. Feels that they are a bit down, but they are slightly down, but not as bad as it was a couple of days ago. So quite a few topics. Fabio, how's everything going? How's the community? What's the chit and chatter? Give us a bit of a high level, and then we're gonna go into the details.
Super exciting week. I was looking forward to Bitcoin Miami for quite a while. I'm not going to be there in person, but I'm going to follow the whole event on live stream. It's always very exciting. The last few years, they're doing a great job at organizing these events. In general market, there is not a lot to discuss. Just same old. It's a lot of inflation talks still. And of course, economy, housing, but nothing really changed since the last 2 or 3 weeks that we really did a deep dive on macroeconomic topics. So I guess the main topic of this week is going to be Bitcoin Miami. And we had a slight or a very brief conversation ahead of this call, where we already touched on that, and both Julian and me feel the same, that the organizing instance, which is Bitcoin Magazine, is a very so you could almost say that there is somewhat of a politic spectrum in Bitcoin, where you have like the hardliner Bitcoin maxis all the way on the right, and you have like the more left-leaning or the more open-minded people that are into BRC20 and into Ordinals and into other things like make Bitcoin fun again, magic internet money people on the left side. And Bitcoin Magazine used to be more hardliner, more Bitcoin only, just money, separating money from state, small blocks, no fun. And they are more leaning into the middle now. And you could really see that change from last year to this year. They invited a lot of broader people, or like more crypto people, like for example BitBoy, which is like
definitely not a Bitcoiner in that sense. Yeah,
definitely not a Bitcoiner. No. And also people that get criticized a lot by the hardliners. So you have, for example, Udi Wertheimer, which, he used to be one of the biggest trolls on Twitter, very much a Bitcoin toxic maximalist, and he coined the phrase have fun staying poor. But he's more in the left-leaning camp right now. He's very much into Ordinals, and he really criticizes Bitcoin culture and the Bitcoin hardliners a lot. And he will be a keynote speaker. He will be a guest. And there's a lot of talk about him being on stage there. And Eric Wall and Udi, they have these Bitcoin wizards, which you might saw them on Twitter. It's like paint in Microsoft Paint, painted wizards and a few knowledgeable people and a few very known people, they have them as profile pictures, it's sort from NFTs, but they are Bitcoin ordinals, and they have a whole hashtag Miami Quest, where they dress up as wizards and go to Miami, to the conference. That's at least the things that I saw in anticipation of the event. What are you making of the shift that Bitcoin Magazine did?
I think this happened a bit over during the COVID times as well. I think if you look at the conference, how it was before COVID and then how it turned afterwards, it was night and day. And I think a lot of this was only possible because the conference organizers just realized if they only go for the real hardliners, it will stay more of a it's going to be a very loud conference, but it's going to be very niche, right? And we know that the hardliners, the laser eyes, and so on, they are generally more of a smaller group, but they're very opinionated, very loud, right? And so I think the organizers just realized, okay, we have to open it up a bit more, get a bit of a bigger audience. Whether this is the right or wrong thing, it really depends a bit. Again, people know I'm not the biggest fan of the Bitcoin hardliners, but I do respect what they're doing. I do respect where they're coming from. And so it's always interesting to kind of see, is this the right thing or is this the wrong thing from an event? I mean, from the size and everything, I definitely think it was the right thing. If that's the best thing for Bitcoin, I don't know. Always a bit tricky. Again, I definitely fall way more on the centric kind of side. I love that idea way more of. I don't necessarily think like all the craziness is good. So I think even though we have invested in ordinals and BRC20 and so on, I do see some of the caveats where all the craziness, this is not going to be the right thing. But I believe like the more utility, the better. And so yeah, I'm happy actually what's happening right now. I love that there's some exploration. And one thing that was very interesting, I had breakfast with Julian. Actually, yesterday we had lunch because he couldn't do breakfast, but we always on Monday catch up. And during lunch yesterday, it was so interesting. We discussed a bit, and Julian is going to Bitcoin Miami, so he's on a plane right now flying. And the interesting observation that he also made was that for the first time, he sees engineers and developers moving into Bitcoin. And over the last probably 10 years, 8 years, I don't know, it was the other way. It was people moving away from Bitcoin, engineers, and going into every other chain where they could actually build and do something and not into Bitcoin. And this was very, very interesting observation. I mean, he has been in the space since 2010, so 13 years. And that observation was very interesting. And I cannot judge it as well as he does, but I can understand where this is coming from. And so I thought that was interesting. And I think at the end, maybe BRC20 or Ordinals are not going to stay the way they are right now. Maybe they're going to evolve in some shape or form. But we may actually be looking back in this moment and be like, wow, like 2023 really was a bit of a seismic shift for Bitcoin, where suddenly engineers and projects came back again. Quite interesting. So I thought that was an interesting observation. Yeah. How do you see price wise? I mean, historically speaking, Bitcoin Miami, as weird as it always is, or actually Bitcoin conference. I mean, it wasn't always in Miami. Bitcoin conference historically always led to a price down. It was always interesting, right? So it was always bearish. I hope this year is different. And I think there are good chances why it's different, because many times in the last years it was always during a bit of a hype cycle. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's more causation? Do you think that's more correlation? Is that just fooled by randomness? Or do you think there's something to it? How do you think this is going to turn out this year?
Yeah, tough question. Historically, it was bearish. And I don't know, it's last year? No, the year before. 2021. It was really just slightly before the Coinbase IPO, and really on top of the first run up. And there
was this crazy one where Max Kaiser was jumping over the stage and was like, F Elon, F Elon, F Elon.
Yeah, that was like the top of the hype of the first run up. And I think it was beginning of May. We had the Coinbase IPO listing on the day of the top, and we had Bitcoin conference leading up to it. And there it was kind of, I don't know if this was coincidence. it really felt like, okay, this is just the pinnacle of hype. So maybe that was the exception. And the other events, we didn't see tops or like extreme sell-offs on the other events. I think in 2022, in 2022, we had Luna also kind of correlate, but a little bit later, I think.
It was a little afterwards, yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because
so
Luna happened right when we had our team gathering in Dubai, and the conference was just before.
Yeah. Maybe it's also, you could also say, okay, this is just seasonality because we go into the summer, but I don't know. It could be a bit similar this year, because still, like I mentioned that last week as well, I still am bearish for the summer, and we're kind of getting it. It's mid-May now, so I could definitely foresee that we have a slightly bullish week until the conference, and then see some sell-off, maybe even continuing selling off during the summertime. But it's extremely hard to say. I don't think it has a big impact on markets this year. And just for size comparisons, and I find this very interesting. So last year in Miami, there were 26,000 attendees, which made it the biggest finance festival or conference in the world, which is pretty crazy. It's a kind of a festival-like experience. I've never been in Miami, but I've attended the Bitcoin conference in Amsterdam. I'm also going to attend this year. It's just around the corner for me, and Miami isn't.
When is it this year?
In October. I think first week or second week of October. And but this year is gonna be only 13,000 people in Miami, so it's half of the size. And I watched a few. I'm following Bitcoin Magazine fairly closely, what they're doing and so on. I find it a very interesting organization and how they approach things. We briefly touched on that they're very nuanced. They have their own ordinals. They're venturing into other things. They're looking into other things, and they're more settling a bit in the middle of the political spectrum in Bitcoin, which I also find interesting. So they're trying to cater to a bigger market, I guess. And they hinted at it that the conference is going to change drastically, and this year is going to be the last old school Miami conference.
Really? What does that mean? That's interesting.
I don't know what that means. My best guess is, and this is not, I didn't read about this, it's just me making things up. My best guess would be that they want to decentralize this a lot more, that they want to have more events spread around the world instead of just this one big conference in Miami. And they are already going into that direction with Bitcoin Amsterdam and so that's my guess, that they don't want to have this one big conference with like 20,000 people, but more like year-round decentralized kind of. But I'm not 100% sure.
Have you been following what Ethereum is doing right now in Montenegro? Have you? I don't know if you have been following this at all. I don't know. So I thought that was so interesting. Where they're doing I think 2 months almost. So for 2 months, everyone is kind of going into this resort, and they're like kind of all stuck together. And then every week is like a bit of a different theme. So they're not only doing crypto. So they talk about AI, they talk about longevity, they talk about all kinds of things. And so it's like people stay for as long as they want. I think Vitalik stays for the entire 2 months, and so on, right? So I thought this was very, very interesting, kind of almost like a summer camp or something. I thought that was interesting, seeing that a bit. I don't know. So that was just quite interesting to see. And I mean, obviously, very different needs that Ethereum has versus that Bitcoin has. So it's probably going to make a lot of sense to put people together for like 2 months and kind of have them brainstorm and so on. So I thought this was quite interesting. I didn't know. Okay.
I find it also kind of interesting that the Bitcoin conference moves more into a macroeconomic finance thing where also you will talk about lots of other stuffs like building underground bunkers and guns and eating steak and things like that. It's more in this direction. Like there's also a lot of talk about gold, about macroeconomics, about general economics and politics and so on. While if you visit broader crypto conferences or Ethereum conferences, it's more developers and tech, building pictures of all kinds of things that are being sold and very a little bit more niche, I would say.
Pictures being sold, Fabio. How does it make you feel that the first purchase was not a pizza, but
yeah,
you're in a safe space here. Share your feelings and express. You can lie down on your couch and share. Yeah, how does that make you feel?
Sure.
Maybe for some context. Maybe give some context first. Maybe some people are confused.
We had the whole ordinals thing. We're talking specifically about ordinals, no?
Sure, but we're talking about that the very first purchase actually. Was not a pizza.
Yes. So Julian shared a post. I think it's out of Bitcoin Forum. Just by the look of it,
Udi was the one who uncovered that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there is this screenshot of a forum post, and I think it's from January 2010, where some dude sold a desktop picture for $500 Bitcoin, $1. Yeah. So the first transaction is probably, I don't know if actually a picture got sold or not.
And Satoshi even helped. So basically, Udi is inferring that Satoshi wanted ordinals to happen. And he wanted Bitcoin to be used to buy JPEGs. And he wanted to kind of get into the meme culture. So how does that make you feel knowing that Satoshi wanted that? Or do you think that's just Udi trolling?
A bit of both. I follow ordinals with two eyes, not just one eye. Like I find it's an interesting development. And I try to hear both sides of the coins. I follow a lot of hardliners on Twitter, and I understand where they are coming from. I understand why they are against this. And I also follow a lot of people that are really pro. I really love how Saylor thinks about this, because he's right there in the middle, and he just says, look, I love free markets.
I was actually very surprised. I have to admit that. I was very surprised about Saylor in this. And I have to give him props, because I thought he was going to come out and go completely different than he did. So I give him props for that.
He's doing an amazing job actually at being not an influencer, but maybe an opinion leader in these things. And he has a very nuanced takes on a lot of things. And I think this is very helpful, because we don't want to polarize. We want to be exploring. We want to give new things a chance. And with all of these things, and he said that perfectly, we have a bit of a necessity right now. The Bitcoin mempool, it's full. We have a lot of transactions. It's congested network. And what does it do? It creates necessity. It brings these discussion back that we had in 2017. How do we scale these things? And put some necessity, some pressure on that. Hey, now would be a great time to solve that. When transaction fees are low and the network is not congested, nobody wants to talk about scaling. But right now, the whole discussion comes back. I think it's a very positive development, and I like that people or institutions like Bitcoin Magazine and Saylor are very nuanced, not taking one side or the other, but just being there in the middle and kind of giving it a chance.
Muhammad asks in the chat whether we think this is just a cycle, just a hype cycle. Is this something that's going to stay? How do you see this? I'm also going to share some thoughts on that, but how do you see this right now?
So I don't think it's going to be just pictures. This is the first iteration, but I find this very, very interesting. And here I'm just going to quote Saylor, or paraphrase what Saylor said. And he said, hey, this could be the early development of, and he made this great analogy. And he said, hey, look, I'm worth $1 billion, not me, Fabio, but Saylor. Saylor is worth $1 billion or more. And he wants to inscribe his will, his testament, to be there for when he dies, so nobody can mess with it. hey, the Bitcoin blockchain would actually be a great platform to, inscribe this so nobody can mess with it. And how much would this be worth for
And the
somebody
and the
to?
interesting thing about this is also it's very easy to timestamp it, right? So if he wanted to update that will, it's very simple. Whoever finds the latest version, that's basically the latest version. And if you don't find a later version, that's the later version. If you have a version that's like 3 days old and then someone has a newer version, it's very like it's undeniably the updated version, right? So that is always a big thing in legal or in law when there's two wills, right? And then which one is actually the one that supersedes the other one? So yeah.
Yeah, this would be one sector. Another sector that would be interesting is, so I'm into 3D printing. I love 3D printer. I don't have a printer yet, but I'm following all the developments very, very closely and kind of trying to make my mind up to buy one. And there is a lot of plans and things that you can print that bigger companies wouldn't like. So I make one example that everybody can understand, and it's also kind of funny. So we have a vacuum cleaner at home, and sometimes I'm not into vacuum cleaning, so I don't clean a lot. But I did, and the bag was full. I never switched the vacuum cleaner with our vacuum cleaner at home. Usually my girlfriend does that because I never encountered a full one. So I took the whole thing out and I threw it into the garbage. It just happens to be that that there was this small blue plastic thing that was still attached to the bag, and I threw that away as well. But without that, you cannot add a new bag. And so what I did is, shit, okay, I need to order a new thing. And there is like vacuumelements.com or whatever, like a page where you can buy these things. There's $40 for a plastic thing,
Yeah.
but you can 3D print it for $1.
Yeah, because like supply
And
and demand is like they know either you buy a new one or you need to buy that replacement thing, and so you're gonna pay whatever as long as it's somehow reasonable. And so yeah, they're gonna make you empty. They make you poor with that.
yeah, and things like that, plans for specific machinery, books that are maybe forbidden in some countries, 3D printed guns. There is like a whole section of interesting applications that could inscribe in a censorship resistant blockchain. So I agree with Sailor there. It could be very interesting and just the early stages of what we're about to see. And yeah.
I mean, I 100% agree with you, Fabio. I also want to caution that maybe this entire meme hype at the moment is not going to be the sustainable one, right? I would actually doubt that this is going to be the sustainable one. Just also how crazy this is right now. I think a few of exchanges have allowed to deposit BRC20s. However, if you try to deposit, you cannot withdraw. And the reason why you cannot withdraw is because the way these BRC20s work is you basically always have them in batches. And the way you have them in batches is by basically giving it a number, and that number numbers the batch. So for the exchange to let you withdraw, they're basically having to mint again from scratch. And that costs them so much money that they actually don't want you to withdraw, right? So they're going to allow you to trade them because but it's really not one for one. So you're trading paper BRC20s, and then if you actually want to claim them and withdraw, it's probably not going to be possible until quite far down the line. So I thought this was, really really interesting. So
I have an interesting question. When we
yeah.
talk about, we had one section is a bit ordinals and so on. We have the congestion network. What do you think about block size? I'm very much interested on
My
that.
opinion on this has always been the same, and I say, look, when Bitcoin started, let's say 2009, January 3rd, I would go with the technical requirement. So the main argument against increasing the block size, that the only one that I can follow is decentralization, right? This is the only one. However, I don't understand if that is true, then why don't we go with the technical development? I mean, over the last 10 years, right? Speed of the internet, storage capacity. I don't know. It probably went up 100x. So what was a gigabyte 10 years ago is probably like 100 gigabytes, 100 gigabyte today. So to me, I don't see any explanation on why it wouldn't be okay in increasing the block size a little bit. Like I'm not saying we have to 100x it, right? But I don't know, increase it. You can even increase it linearly with every halving and just go and say one, two, three, four, five. Honestly, if in 100 years we cannot support 100 megabyte block, something is wrong with the technology. Like with technology, kind of broke, because it just makes no sense how this technological kind of advancement is. So that is my opinion. I've always been of that opinion. Um, I believe that right now, with what's going on, it's just impossible to kind of change because miners have way too strong of an incentive now not to change it. Plus, Blockstream, who are the major kind of opinion makers in the Bitcoin space, have no interest in changing it because they need this for everything that they're developing. So I just think there's zero interest in actually increasing the block size. The all the arguments that I always see from like the hardliners, I know they always centered around this concept of centralization, and I'm like, dude, if 5 years ago 1 megabyte blocks were okay, 2 megabyte blocks today are definitely okay because we definitely doubled everything, right? So we can argue if 10 megabyte is okay or two, but I think a bigger block size than 5 years ago is 100% okay. How is this not okay? Now I understand why we're not moving at all, and I'm not expecting it to move. That's just a bit of my thoughts on that. How do you see it, Fabio?
Yeah, I actually agree a lot with, especially with the statement technical capabilities. So I think it's very. I run my own node, and I know a lot of people that do, and it's important that these developments, so the raising of the block size, happens in partnership with like the technical requirements. So it
100%.
cannot be too expensive or unreasonable to run your own node. But as storage kind of grows and gets less and less expensive, and network capabilities, so the speed of the internet and so on, as these things grow, it's also possible to grow the block space. Like I come out of, I studied system technology, so IT, with a major in networks. And it's very important that networks need to scale in layers. So for everybody that is interested in scaling and networks and blockchain, definitely put some time into studying TCP/IP, and all the narratives that were created around TCP/IP. That so many times along the creation of it and the scaling of it, hundreds and hundreds of people, very knowledgeable people, said it's impossible to scale. It cannot scale. It cannot scale, and eventually did. And like how it is set up in layers, it's very interesting. And I think the same thing should happen with Bitcoin. I think we should scale it in layers, but there needs to be a reasonable discussion about the 1 to 4 megabyte blocks, because right now, as you pointed out correctly, both the speed of the internet and the storage capabilities became a lot cheaper and broadly available. So we should definitely, at one point, consider slightly raising the block. The only thing there is we don't want to have the American approach, and I call it the American approach because you have these 16-lane highways, and then people said just add another lane, and then and it's not solved. You can see these highways outside of LA, for example, with 16 lanes, and you just add another lane. It's not going to solve the scaling issue. And that's also a little bit of my worry. If we go down that path, that, okay, we just make it bigger, and eventually you're going to end up with enormous blocks that require AWS infrastructure or server centers to run your own node, and that's not that wouldn't be a great future. So a bit of nuance there as well, but I found your take to be very nuanced.
Mohammed asks a nice question here. Is there a beef between CC and Elon and Julian? He unfollowed you both. So the story came up because there was some way, like some account that tracks this stuff, that showed that CC unfollowed Elon. And then and CC used to follow me. And then I clicked on CC and I noticed that he's not following me anymore. Honestly, I don't know if this was at the same time. Maybe he started unfollowing me, I don't know, a year ago. I have no clue. I really didn't check. So, and then it was just me commenting under that tweet that he also unfollowed me. And the interesting thing is, a lot of media outlets actually picked this up and started talking about CC unfollowing Elon and like Julian. And like I got a lot of media notifications because of that. makes no sense to put me into the same sentence, right? I also think it has nothing to do with each other. Could be right that I don't know that CC got triggered by something that I said. I mean, Mohammed says maybe it is because of the BUSD issue. Sure, could be, right? What do I know, right? I honestly don't know. I do think though the reason maybe CC unfollowed Elon, in my opinion, is because Twitter integrated eToro and not Binance. That is my just very subjective assumption here. And I'm probably totally wrong. Maybe it was just a mistake. I don't know. Maybe Elon kicked Binance off the cap table. Can also be that, Elon said, hey, I don't want to deal with Binance on my cap table. I don't want to have these issues with a company that gets kind of pursued by the CFTC. Maybe I'll get issues with this. Maybe this is just that, right? I don't know, really. So, and I really don't think it has. I want to be very clear. I saw a lot of the news articles. I 100% doubt that this is anyhow related, that CC unfollowed Elon and myself for the same reason. I also don't think, it didn't even happen at the same time. I just noticed because there was this tweet, and that's how I noticed. So, I don't know. Have you seen anything else on the Elon unfollowing thing?
No, first when I heard it, I was making the assumption for myself, okay, maybe he's going to switch to lists, and a lot of Twitter accounts, they unfollow people and they switch to lists, but CC is still following like 1,600 people, so I guess that's not the reason. And yeah, Muhammad said a little bit childish, if true. Yeah, I don't know. I hadn't seen, I didn't even notice that this was happening.
I mean, I only saw it because of those tweets, so yeah. Did you look into the Ethereum kind of finalization issues? My goodness, what a word! Ethereum finalization issues last week with those 2 times when the blocks couldn't get finalized. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
Yeah, I looked a bit into it. I think it's still not really clear. If anyone found anything where I kind of kept a bit track of it, also looked a bit on Reddit and so on, didn't really find anything. And what was the actual reason? So the way this works on Ethereum is that after about 15 minutes, a finalization happens, which is the time when you would have to sacrifice 1/3 of all staked ETH in order to backtrack this. So you can only backtrack this part if you actually are willing to sacrifice 1/3 of the staked ETH. So it's very unlikely. Especially because, I mean, about 10% of all ETH is staked now. It's an all-time high. And so that means over 3.3% of all ETH would have to get burned. So that's billions of dollars, right? So it's super, super, super unlikely because it's a very high cost, billions of dollars for 15 minutes. So, however, for some reason, the nodes couldn't achieve that finalization. And that was the first time, and then people kind of started freaking out what's going on. And then it seemed all okay. It was a bit weird because no one really knew why this was happening. And then, I think less than 24 hours later, that was the next time they couldn't find this finalization. It was just a bit weird. I don't know. Haven't seen much from that. Not much of the solution or the reasons. I don't know. Sometimes, blockchains are weird. Okay. These are main topics that I had. Anything else, Fabio, that you feel we need to address? Maybe really quickly, if everything goes well this week, we're going to be adding new vaults to our service offering, vaults with a higher yield. However, these vaults will only go towards DUSD. So you will be getting a lot of DUSD. If you want, you can sell those DUSD yourself. But the reason they have these higher returns is because we are going to be allocating the DFI that we get from users towards these vaults. Plus, obviously, there is no stabilization fee included yet. So you're going to get 50% higher returns because of that. And on top, we're going to be allocating the customer DFI into these vaults. So they should be attracting way more yield. So it could easily be that these vaults are going to have, again, don't quote me on this right now because this stuff changes, but I think it could probably have about twice the yield as the current vaults. The current vaults will stay, so don't worry. But if you want to maximize your yield, you're definitely going to want to check out those vaults. To be honest, the main reason we are launching those is actually two reasons. First, because customers have been asking us if they could not go from the USD into the native coin, because doing that is basically costing them some of the yield. And at the same time, we really want to help the DeFi chain ecosystem. And I think doing so is really going to help the DeFi chain ecosystem. So all in all, this could be a very interesting service. So last week we were on an entire company retreat. So the entire company, or the majority of the company, was actually on a week retreat, getting together, bonding, brainstorming. It was a very creative week, very, very powerful week for the team. So yeah, we didn't want to launch it the week before, just because that last week we don't want to be fixing anything if there's anything to fix. So we want to launch it this week. Actually quite interesting from a security perspective, all the measurements we had to take so that actually we could do a 1 week retreat. Quite crazy. I'm not going to go into the details because I'm not going to reveal any security things, but I can promise you it was quite crazy from all kinds of things, from a security front, from how to behave and so on. You cannot imagine. Always interesting to see that. So I don't know, Fabio, anything else we're missing here that we need to add?
We can maybe super briefly touch on macro. The only thing I would love to mention there is I actually saw an hour-long session with Stanley Drunkenmiller, one of the greats, if not the. He's up there, with Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, Stanley Drunkenmiller. These are the people I kind of look up to in the investing world, and a lot of people do, because they kind of have the track record and the credentials. And he said a few interesting things. He was at a conference, I think, or he spoke at an event that it's called SON 2023, and he's mostly in cash, and he said is the wildest and most difficult time for him to make decisions, to give forward guidance, to guide the current markets. And he specifically mentioned a few times that he considers the time we are in as a big bubble in assets, an extreme bubble in assets, especially equities. He thinks, for example, housing is pretty robust, or it looks pretty robust, but he's especially like things like the NASDAQ and so on. He considers them to be in a bubble. And he wasn't really specific on a timeline. So he said it's always, almost impossible to put a time frame on it. So if, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. But he was very specific that he considers the market to be in one of the biggest financial asset bubbles that he's ever encountered, which I found extremely interesting. Because if you look at the markets, we are holding we are 13% or so below all-time highs, and the markets are very distorted, and a lot of people don't actually acknowledge that maybe to the full extent, because you cannot apply classical analysis and cash flow, PE ratios and so on, because COVID and the stimulus with COVID just distorted everything, and it's so hard to see what's real and what's not, and how we will go from here. And he kind of doubled down on that point, which I found very, very interesting, because a lot of people, I follow a guy, it's called Felix Zulauf. It's a Swiss investor, and I really like everything that he does, because he has a very conservative approach, and he says a lot of times in periods like right now, like in very interesting periods where we don't really have a precedence and we don't know what's happening, the best thing you can do is listen to dinosaurs, listen to people with gray hair that have been in a lot of different circumstances and have been in the markets for a very long time. So if somebody like Stanley Drunkenmiller says something like that, it's definitely very, very interesting. That's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Cool. Yeah, interesting. Definitely interesting times. Yeah. No, nothing else. Then let's not drag this out unnecessarily. Let's see what the conference is going to bring. We're going to keep you updated. We're going to definitely talk about this next week. If you are not a customer yet, but you want to use relatively complicated services like staking, liquidity mining, lending, and so on, and you want to use them in a very simple manner. That's what Cake is for, really empowering you to take control of your financial destiny. So go over to cakedefi.com, sign up, get cash from your crypto. Also, we are one of the few companies still hiring. I want to be very clear though, most of the roles are in Singapore. So you have to either be willing to move here or live here. With that,
Maybe we can
yeah,
also show the promotion that we have going right now. So
please,
if you
pizza.
go, yeah, if you go to our app or to our website, you will see a small promotion. And if you're in crypto and you like to predict prices, you should definitely give it a go. You don't have to spend any money or anything. You can just go to our web application or to our mobile application. You will find a pizza day promotion. So if you can predict the price of either DeFi and or Bitcoin on the pizza day, you can win a whole year of free pizza. Yeah, definitely give it a go. If you can just type in your estimation or your prediction, and you might win a lot of pizza.
I love it. Great. With this, everyone, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe, like, share, and then see you next time. All the best. Stay healthy. Have a good rest of the week. Bye bye, everyone. Cheers.